$12 billion. That is what left Ghana's soil in a single year, extracted, processed, and shipped abroad, while the country generating it watched from the outside. Not taxed properly, not retained, not invested, sent out through legal mechanisms designed specifically to make sure it never stayed. And here's what makes that number matter to you. The next global commodity supercycle, the one that determines who controls battery technology, rare earth processing, and energy independence, runs directly through West African gold. What Ghana does in the next 18 months will either lock the developing world into another century of extraction economics or break that pattern for the first time. Washington is paying attention. Beijing is already positioned. This channel covers what mainstream financial media skips, the structural shifts underneath the headlines that determine where power actually moves. If that kind of analysis is useful to you, subscribe now and turn on notifications. This is the video that explains the template every resource-rich developing nation is now studying. Ghana is the largest gold producer on the African continent. It sits above one of the most mineral-dense geological formations on Earth, the Birimian Greenstone Belt, a band of ancient volcanic rock that runs through West Africa and contains some of the highest-grade gold deposits ever surveyed. For decades, the operational reality of Ghanaian gold was simple. International mining companies held the licenses, employed the workers, extracted the ore, and sent the refined product abroad. The government collected a royalty typically between 3 and 5% of the market value of what was pulled out and called it a fair deal. The official narrative from the mining companies described this arrangement as mutually beneficial. Ghana got jobs, infrastructure investment, and foreign exchange inflows. The companies got access to world-class deposits. Everyone won. Here is what the operational reality actually showed. Ghana retained approximately 6 to 8% of the total economic value generated by its gold sector. The rest through royalty structures, transfer pricing between subsidiaries, tax optimization frameworks, and foreign currency repatriation left the country. A nation sitting on one of the richest gold belts on the planet was capturing less than $1 in 10 of what that gold was worth. 350,000 small-scale miners Ghanaians working informal and semi-formal claims called Galamsey operations were simultaneously extracting an estimated 6 to 8 tons of gold per year with zero formal integration into the country's revenue system. They were neither taxed nor supported. They were periodically criminalized, and they were the visible symptom of a structural problem that had no solution inside the existing framework. Now here is the number that changes the frame entirely. Gold is currently trading above $2,300 per troy ounce. Ghana produces approximately 4 million troy ounces annually through its formal sector. That is a gross extraction value exceeding $9 billion per year from the formal sector alone. Add informal production estimates, and the real figure clears $12 billion. At a 5% royalty rate, Ghana was officially collecting somewhere in the range of $400 to $500 million annually from an industry generating $12 billion in gross value on its territory. Read that again. $12 billion generated. Less than 500 million retained through official channels. The reform framework now moving through Ghana's policy apparatus is built on 3 structural interventions. First, royalty rate restructuring. The government has moved to implement sliding scale royalty mechanisms that increase the government's take as gold prices rise above certain thresholds. This is not new in global mining policy. Australia, Canada, and several other jurisdictions have used gold price linked royalties for years, but its implementation in Ghana represents a direct challenge to the fixed rate contracts that major producers negotiated during lower price environments. Companies including Goldfields, Newmont, and Anglo Gold Ashanti hold significant operational assets in Ghana. Their contracts did not anticipate gold at $2,300 per ounce. The renegotiation dynamic is real, and it is contentious. Second, the Ghana Gold Board. This is the mechanism that deserves the most analytical attention and gets almost none from Western financial media. The Ghanaian government has moved to establish a state-controlled gold purchasing and aggregation entity, a board with the mandate to buy gold directly from small-scale producers, formalize previously illegal operations, and create a domestic gold trading ecosystem that routes value through the Ghanaian state rather than directly to international commodity markets. The model has historical precedents. Tanzania's State Mineral Trading Company, Botswana's diamond marketing arrangement with De Beers, and most notably Russia's state-backed precious metals purchasing framework all use versions of this structure. What makes Ghana's version significant is the timing. It is being built while gold prices are at or near all-time highs, which means the board enters the market with favorable economics. Third, local refining capacity. Ghana does not have a major domestic gold refinery operating at industrial scale. It is exporting Dorbar's semi-processed gold, which are then refined abroad and re-enter the global market at a price that reflects the added value of refining. That value does not return to Ghana. The government's stated intention to build or license domestic refining infrastructure is the piece of this reform framework that has the longest timeline and the highest capital requirement, but it is also the piece that, if achieved, would fundamentally alter Ghana's position in the global gold value chain. Here is the math that explains why this matters beyond Ghana's borders. African nations collectively produce approximately 25% of the world's gold. The vast majority of that gold is exported in unrefined or semi-refined form. The refining value add the difference between the price of Dorr and the price of London Good Delivery gold bars is roughly 3 to 5% of total gold value per transaction. On a global gold market worth $500 billion annually, 3 to 5% represents $15 to $25 billion in value add that currently flows to refining centers in Switzerland, the United Arab Emirates, South Africa, and to a growing degree, the United Arab Emirates DMCC platform. If African nations, beginning with Ghana, successfully build domestic refining capacity, they do not just capture that 3 to 5%. They become price-setting participants in the market rather than price-taking suppliers. The distinction is civilizational in its implications for long-term economic sovereignty. Now pull back further. China's positioning in this space is not accidental and is not recent. Chinese state-linked entities have been the dominant investors in West African mining infrastructure for the better part of 15 years. The China National Gold Group Corporation, Shandong Gold, and several second-tier operators have built operational presences across Ghana, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea. These are not passive investments. They are strategic footprints in the commodity supply chains that China's industrial economy depends on. Here is the dimension almost nobody in Western financial media is discussing plainly. China has been simultaneously building the Ghanaian relationships and constructing a parallel gold market infrastructure through the Shanghai Gold Exchange. The SCHE has been aggressively courting African producers to conduct transactions denominated in yuan rather than dollars. A Ghanaian gold board that aggregates domestic production and seeks non-Western buyers as a natural counterpart for that infrastructure. The trade flow logic writes itself. The dollar's role as the default settlement currency for global commodity transactions depends on there being no viable alternative. Ghana's reform, if it connects to yuan-denominated purchasing, is a small but structurally meaningful contribution to building that alternative. Russia's interest is different but parallel. Moscow's own gold sector, the second largest in the world by production volume, has been cut off from London and Swiss refining infrastructure by sanctions. Russia has been routing gold through UE intermediaries and developing alternative settlement frameworks precisely because Western financial exclusion forced the improvisation. A world in which African producers establish non-Western gold trading infrastructure is a world in which Russia's sanctions evasion architecture becomes more normalized. Moscow is watching Ghana's experiment with quiet interest. In the United States, Washington's response to West African resource nationalism has been notably slow and structurally inadequate. The Lobito Corridor Infrastructure Project, a U.S.-backed railway initiative connecting Zambian and Congolese copper and cobalt deposits to the Angolan coast, represents the Biden administration's belated recognition that China's infrastructure investment strategy in Africa was winning. But there is no equivalent U.S. strategic framework for West African gold. The Treasury Department and the Commerce Department have no coordinated response to the Ghana Gold Board that matches China's ability to offer state-backed purchasing agreements, yuan settlement, and infrastructure investment in the same package. Here are my 3 predictions with time frames attached. Within 12 months, at least one of the major international gold producers operating in Ghana, most likely Newmont or Gold Fields, will publicly challenge the royalty restructuring through international arbitration. The investor-state dispute settlement mechanisms embedded in Ghana's investment treaties give them that option. The arbitration process will be slow, will cost Ghana significant legal resources, and will test whether the government's political will for reform survives the pressure that litigation generates. Within 18 months, the Ghana Gold Board will have signed at least one formal purchasing agreement with a non-Western counterparty, either a Chinese state entity or a Wei-based intermediary. That agreement will be framed publicly as economic diversification. Western financial analysts will call it a dangerous precedent. Both descriptions will be accurate simultaneously. Within 3 years, at least 3 other West African nations, likely including Mali, Guinea, and Côte d'Ivoire, will have adopted versions of the Ghanaian model. Resource nationalism is contagious when it appears to work. The template Ghana is building right now is being studied in Bamako, Conakry, and Abidjan. What burns quietly beneath all of this is a question that applies far beyond Ghana's borders. Can a country in the 21st century actually capture sovereign value from its natural resources inside a global financial system specifically designed to route that value elsewhere? Ghana does not know the answer yet. Neither does anyone else. But the experiment is running now, in real time, with $12 billion per year on the table. Drop your prediction in the comments. Which happens first, the international arbitration from a major miner, the non-Western purchasing deal, or a third African nation adopting this model? Tell me, because I read every single one. If this gave you a framework that the financial press did not a way to understand resource, nationalism, yuan, settlement, and African commodity economics as a connected system rather than separate stories, share this with one person who is trying to understand where global power is actually moving.